And let me start off by saying that pre-primary in the CBE starts at the age of 4, or what we call pre-primary 1. So pre-primary 1, then pre-primary 2 is what the foundation stage is at CBE. By the end of this level, which is now PP1 and PP2, the child should be able to recognize the letters of the alphabet and the sound that that letter makes. So, for example, if I'm talking to a child, I can point to sound B, they know that that's sound B. And of course, do not create at this level ideas of what a family should look like. Remember, the child understands what is the reality there. Are you wondering what your child is learning in kindergarten, in primary school, in junior school, in upper primary? Welcome and welcome back to Elimu Cafe. I'm Teacher Leah, and this episode, we're going to dissect the CBC curriculum, look further down and just pick it up a little more than what we did in the previous episodes. Today, I want us to look at the content, the learning areas, and the theoretical justifications as to why CBC has been designed as is. Now, a quick update. Now CBC is CBE as of our shooting today. Before we release this episode, CBC is now called the Competency-Based Education. I like it. It encompasses the whole education experience, and it also gives it a more lifelong look as opposed to just being an academic journey. So CBC is going to still remain based on the competencies that we discussed in the previous episode, if you can remember. And if you haven't, please check out our previous episode that discusses the competencies. And so we just look at now what exactly happens in the classroom. You know, what is my child learning? Maybe some of you have been asking yourself that question. What exactly is expected of my baby in certain levels of education? So we're going to start off this episode with kindergarten, or what we call pre-primary. So that's going to be our first discussion. And let me start off by saying that pre-primary in the CBE starts at the age of 4, or what we call pre-primary 1. So pre-primary 1, then pre-primary 2 is what the foundation stage is at CBE as of today. Now, a lot of parents always ask, or a lot of teachers or anybody who is interested, hey, what about the children who are below the age of 4? First of all, the age that is appropriate for a child to join pre-primary 1 is 4 years. The policy dictates, or the policy suggests, that the child should have turned 4 by January 31st of that year. So for example, if your child is going to school next year, they're supposed to have turned 4 already, or they are about to turn 4 January 31st of that year. So of course, there's been a lot of conversations around, you know, what about the children who are born in February and March? And that's probably a policy discussion that we can have at another episode. But ideally, the child should have turned 4 when they're joining pre-primary 1. Now, in the past, in what we used to call the 844, there used to be this class used to be called baby class, or some people will call it KG1, and all these other names. And that was a class that existed for children who had not yet turned 4. There used to be a 3-year to 4-year-old class. Now that in the CBE no longer exists, or is no longer recognized in the structure as we know it. And so if you as a parent opt to take your child to school before they turn 4 years old, most schools are offering it in different capacities. It can be a daycare, it can be called playgroup, it can be called baby class, it can be called nursery, but that class is not a prerequisite to anything. Please take note of that. That class essentially is an option. It's for parents or guardians who feel, you know what, I feel my child is staying home alone, they're bored, I would like them to get some skills. And it is important for you to note that at this level, there should be no or very little academic work that the child is actually doing. What does that mean? This level, the child should be focusing on play, on learning some basic independent skills, and for building, friendships, and just having an opportunity to play with others, to make friends, to build skills like learning how to eat by themselves, cleaning up after themselves. Some schools actually offer potty training as an option, but do not feel any pressure as a parent to take your child to school at this level. As I said before, this is really just preferential. It has no basis, or it is not a prerequisite for any child who is going to the next stage, which is the pre-primary 1 stage. The pre-primary 1 stage is actually the official class in which a child is supposed to start formal learning under the competency-based education. And so today let's focus on that pre-primary 1 stage and pre-primary 2 stage. So the child has turned 4, your baby has turned 4, your nephew, your niece, your grandchild has turned 4, and now they're ready for school. What exactly are they learning? I'm not going to go deep into the day-to-day activities, but it is important for you to know the subjects and also the foundation, so that when you're thinking about learning, you ask yourself, is my child too far ahead? Or is whatever they're learning in school developmentally appropriate? And is it justified by science and by development studies to ensure that your child gets the best at the age they're at? Now, 4 years is the foundation stage of learning. Think about it as a house. When you're building a house, the most important step is the foundation. What am I laying as the base for my child? Foundation stage means that you're building skills, you're building a knowledge base that is going to dictate how they learn or how they grow or how they integrate into education in the long run. So the foundational stage is really, really important. And so the 4 to 6 year old child is going through the foundational stage of the CBE. The competencies that we discussed in the previous episode, collaboration and communication, learning to learn, problem solving and critical thinking, so much more, the 7 competencies are all meshed in or are supposed to be working in tandem with the content that is being taught in those classes. Now, let's go to the learning areas. So what learning areas is your child going to learn, or what are the subjects? As some of us may know it, what are the subjects? Now they're called learning areas, but if you're an 844 student or any other curriculum, most people will call it subjects. But here we're going to call them by the names or by the terms that have been recognized by the CBE, and that's the learning areas. So I'll be going through my notes every once in a while, just to give you a more comprehensive, journey of this. Now, the learning areas in the foundational stage of education of the CBC or the CBE education are 6. That is language, and language, by language I mean language activities. Language activities are both English and Swahili. Remember, at this stage, scientists and all child development theorists believe that children are very multilingual. So the child can actually just be learning any language that is, at the catchment area where you stay. So if it's English that is there, please let them use English. Some schools actually even teach in mother tongue. Some people will teach Swahili, whichever is the language of the catchment area. It's fine. Don't feel the pressure to have that child speak English at this level, because the most important thing that the child is learning at this level is actually recognition of sounds. Now, the recognition of sounds is the phonics. The phonics is the sound that a letter makes in the alphabet. So we know sound A, we know letter A, but what sound does letter A make? So at this level, by the end of this level, which is now PP1 and PP2, the child should be able to recognize the letters of the alphabet and the sound that letter makes. So, for example, if I'm talking to a child, I can point to sound B, they know that that's sound B. The B is very important at this level, and you don't have to overthink that they know what B is, because B is the name, but the sound is important because it's what will be used to blend and be able to teach the child the foundation of reading or of literacy as we know it. So at this level, that aspect of recognizing letters of the alphabet is important, and it begins at the age of 4. On top of that, there's a lot of listening skills that the child is supposed to develop. So they're supposed to be listening to stories, they're supposed to be listening to rhythms, they're supposed to be listening to sounds. So this point, at school, the children are talking about what sound does a cow make? Moo. What sound does an elephant make? I don't know what sound an elephant makes, but all these sounds are very important for the child. At this level, just make it as easy breezy as possible for them to develop their listening skills. So the pressure of all these things, oh, is my child learning nini, it's not really important at this stage. So here, the child is learning to express themselves as well. So apart from them listening, they're also now learning to express themselves. And expression is very relative. Communication at this stage is not about articulating yourself in perfect English, articulating yourself in Kiswahili or whatever language you're using. At this level, articulation or expression is for them to know how to speak in whatever capacity they can. So your child knows that I'm hungry, I can be able to ask for food. If they are sad, they can be able to talk about it. They're expressing themselves. So at this level, you're asking your child, what did you learn in school? They can talk to their teachers. Who are they trusting? And all these things. That's what's really happening at that language activity level. Expression, listening, recognition of the alphabet. This is at PP1 level, as I said before. And so this child is learning these things. And then now we go to the hands. What are we preparing when it comes to writing? At this point, we are building their fine motor skills. Their fine motor skills is what I'm doing. To be able to hold a pen is very important. Remember, this child is assumed to be coming to school for the first time. So the teacher is concentrating a lot on the scribbling, on writing, but basic, just basic joining the dots. I'm sure some of you have seen that in school. Joining the dots, making sure that the child is able to just use their pen. Holding the pen is actually a very important skill for literature or for language at this level. So definitely when you're thinking about, okay, my child, what is my child doing at PP1? This is pretty much the baseline of PP1 learning. Then, of course, when you go to PP2, this child, remember now they know how to say sound B and A. So now they start blending. They start blending the words. B and A make ba. So it can be 2-letter words, it can be 3-letter words, depending on this, on the level of sophistication that the child is at. Some students will go further on and they can also be able to do what we call tricky words. But please do not feel the pressure at this level. My child is enjoying school, priority number 1. Is my child able to listen effectively? Can they able to identify sounds in the environment? That's another thing. The other thing is, are they able to express themselves? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but my child is able to say, I like this, I'm able to do this at school. Sometimes you can find that in school, they're talking about what happens in the morning, what happens in the afternoon, what happens in the evening. They'll come and tell you what they did in school, and in school they're telling their teacher what they did. And so focus on those things. Does my class teacher tell my children to have show and tell? Does my class teacher tell my children to, talk about their day, talk about their evening? Are they able to express themselves? That's the most important thing. And of course, at this point, they're also building their vocabulary. So the child is coming home with more vocabulary. They've learned a bit more. Their brain is also expanding. Remember, they're also going through their own cognitive growth. And so at that level, let it be just easy breezy. And that is very important for language. So because remember, we are building a foundation. Now, the next learning area is mathematics. Now, mathematics, this is where a lot of us really go berserk, because mathematics people think, oh, my child is in PP2 and they should be doing multiplication and blah, blah, blah. No, as I told you, the foundation is purely on mathematics, counting, number recognition, matching and grouping, comparing, and identification of shapes. That is in PP1. So the question you should be asking yourself is, at the end of the year, can my child identify numbers 1 to 10? Please take note, I said 1 to 10. Not 1 to 100, not 1 to 500. No, it's actually supposed to be 1 to 10. The 1 to 10 counting of objects, my child is able to pick a pen and say, this is 1 pen, 2 pens, 3 pens. That is very important at that level. Matching and grouping. You've put a lot of items together, but my child is able to say, these are leaves, these are flowers, this is red, these are red pens, these are green pens. The matching and grouping at this level is what is important at PP1. Then, of course, we talk about comparing. Is this less? Is this the same? So you put for them 2 bottles of water. You ask them, which one has more? Which one has less? You're just introducing the basic mathematical concepts. It's not about mastery. It's about an introduction, foundation level. And then, of course, there's identification of shapes, very important. Is this triangle? Is this circle? And you can use what we call, at this point, because your children are not very abstract, you can use like, is this, something that is round? This is pizza. Is pizza a circle? It's very easy for children to understand things from the point of, this is something I can be able to see. It's actually called concrete objects. Now, when you go to PP2, we go a level higher on number recognition, of course. A child has come from PP1, they already know 1 to 10. Now they're going a bit higher. Let's not go beyond 20. And of course, there are variations to this conversation because of intelligence levels, but 20, just slightly above, is fine. Don't worry. Don't pressure yourself. 1 to 20 for foundation level is actually very, very good. And then, of course, you can also introduce what we call the number value. So number value is becoming a bit more sophisticated, where they can be able to do some simple addition and some subtraction, but using objects. So you've put a pen, maybe a one pen, you tell a child, one pen plus another, maybe this, how many items do we have together? 2 pens or 2 pencils or 2 sticks, whatever is within your disposal. It's actually a very concrete experience. It's supposed to be very practical at this level. So at that point, of course, as I said, it's becoming a bit sophisticated. You've introduced sizes, you've introduced weight, but it's not in kilograms and meters and all these things. It's just about which one is heavier than the other. Things like that. This is 2 stones. Are 2 stones heavier than 1 stone? Easy breezy kind of concept introduction. And then, of course, now at this point, you can also introduce more complex shapes. You're bringing in the oval, you're bringing in the rectangle. You're just trying to be a bit more sophisticated, but within the confines of the child's mind. Remember, let us appreciate that this child is 4 years to 6 years. Now, the third learning area that the children learn at this level is called the environmental activities. And this one really is just to boost curiosity around their immediate environment. At this point, at PP1 and PP2, it's about what is the immediate environment. Their body is their immediate environment as one. So at this point, they're learning about parts of their body. They're being, what are the common plants and animals in their environment, whichever environment you're in. If you live, for example, in the coast where I currently am, where I currently work, you find that what is the animal that they're likely to see there? A child in the Mara is likely to be introduced to an elephant faster than a child in the coast, isn't it? So tell the child to learn about their immediate environment, and then, of course, observing weather patterns. And this is not about, oh, that is the nimbus cloud or whatever. It's just, is it rainy? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it windy? Simple concepts of weather patterns. And of course, now we talk about family members. Again, that is the immediate environment. What is happening in my home? I live with my mommy. I live with my auntie. I live with my uncle. What about them? Do you know? Remember, you're trying to boost their vocabulary as well in learning, as well as you're learning the language area. So yeah, I live with my mommy. Whichever family member is within their vicinity is who you talk about. And of course, do not create at this level ideas of what a family should look like. Remember, the child understands what is the reality there. So if you live alone with your child, it's okay to talk to them about this. My family is my mommy. My family is my daddy and whoever is within the home. My auntie lives with us and things like that. Then, of course, at this level, again, environment activities, we talk about simple hygiene procedures, how to brush our teeth, how to wash our hands, basic at PP1. At PP2, of course, we move a notch higher. We've identified the parts of the body. Now we describe how they work. What are my hands for? Of course, this one can also be introduced at PP1, but just getting a bit more sophisticated. You also start understanding what are the needs of these plants and animals within our environment. And of course, you can start talking about waste. What does an environment look like? What does a clean environment look like? What are the roles of the people in my community? So what does my dad do? What does my teacher do? Remember, now the immediate environment also includes the school. And then, of course, now you can start talking about seasons, the rainy season. In Kenya, we have the rainy season, we have the dry season. If they've probably lived abroad or they're planning to, you can talk about winter, summer, spring, and autumn and things like that. But at this level, you're just talking about it on a way of also how do you dress in certain different times. So if it's raining, you're supposed to wear a raincoat, you're supposed to carry an umbrella. So that's the basics that happens in environment activities. Then we have the creative activities. The creative activities now, it's about imagination. It's about also building their self-expression. It's about boosting their self-motor skills. So here we're talking about scribbling, coloring, modeling, and all the things art that as you know it. So here at this level, it's different sophistication, mosaic, collage, modeling, dance, tearing and pasting, all these things as we know them. So definitely at this level, again, as I said, a child in PP1 is likely to scribble more and color outside the lines than a child in PP2. And remember, at this point, it's not about the end product, it's about the process. Everything is about the process, to enjoy the creative expression process. It's not about, did you color inside the lines? No, I got a 50 because I colored inside the lines. No, it's about the process and not the end result. Then we go to psychomotor and physical activities, or what we call PE, what we know as PE. So PE is about, of course, the gross motor skills. The gross motor skills is now your hands, moving your legs, moving your body. And here we talk about running, jumping, balancing, the works, getting out imitating animal movements, games, skipping, hopping at different levels of sophistication. A 4-year-old is likely not to balance on one leg as better than a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. And so definitely at this level, think about obstacles that they can play with. And I want to really emphasize that PE is actually a very important aspect at this level because it really incorporates a lot of play, which is very important at this stage. Then we go to religious education. Religious education is covered in different stages, not in different stages really, but different aspects. CRE will be taught to the Christians, IRE will be taught to the Muslims, Hindu will be taught to the Hindu community, and so all these things, it depends on the different levels. But what we're talking about is about understanding the higher power of your religion. If you're talking about CRE, you know about God. If you're talking about IRE, you know about Allah. And so things like that, understanding what they do, understanding the attributes of that God, of that religious group. And also now at this point also it introduces some bit of morals, and at this level they learn about, you know, how to say please and thank you, courtesy, and just starting to introduce children to that aspect of how to work within the community that they are in. So you talk about honesty in PP2, forgiveness, respect, learning about religious holidays, and caring for the environment as a creation of the God they serve. Then, now this is now, as I said, 6 learning areas that we've discussed today. Of course, one thing that I need to emphasize is that at this level, majority of the assessment is not supposed to be what we know before, which is writing on a piece of paper at the end of the term. It's supposed to be portfolios, it's supposed to be projects, it's supposed to be observation, it's supposed to be task-based. So you teach children something, they come to class, they do it. That's why I was talking about show and tell. It's about giving them a chance to have like a whole project on mosaic and collage. It's all about giving a child an opportunity to have that formative process. It's supposed to be step by step to understand the process rather than the end result. And of course, you'll have some bit of assessments to check. Did my learner or did my child understand how to blend sounds? Do they understand how to identify sounds of the alphabet? Those are important assessment tools, but really the focus should be on the main aspect of the process and not the end product. This foundation stage is close to my heart. It's very important for us to give children the best foundation that we can, and it does not involve piling them up with academic expectations. It's about giving them a chance to grow, giving them a chance to play, and just introducing the foundational basics that they need to be able to get going as they grow older. So in the next segment, I'm going to talk about now the foundation and why it is important, and why it is important for us to look at developmentally appropriate activities.